TaxAct knows you don't look forward to taxes. TaxAct doesn't even look forward to taxes, and TaxAct is a tax software company. It's basically TaxAct's whole thing. If TaxAct did things over, maybe TaxAct would end up teaching kindergarten or leading fly fishing tours. But that's a different story for a different ad. So why don't we just agree that taxes aren't fun, but you still have to do them? TaxAct's filing software can help you do that. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Introducing the second best buffalo thing, Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo. Nothing beats buffalo wings on game day, but with a tangy and cheesy buffalo flavor, Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo is proud to be the second best buffalo thing. Grab Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo today.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar. Today's review, the classic Big Mac, Hamburglar.
Bravo, bravo.
He said, there's more sauce in every bite. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Bravo. Available at most restaurants in this area.
How's it going, and welcome to episode 56 of On the Wire, proud member of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Follow the pod on the Twitter at OnTheWirePod. And if you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, please take a second to let us know what you think. I am Adam Howe. You can follow me on the Twitter at 80grade. That is all spelled out. And I am happy to be once again joined by my co-host Kevin Hasting, who should be followed himself at Hasting Kevin. And Kevin, it is good to be back with you. I want to give a special shout out to Lou Landers and Lucas Beery for doing an admirable job with you the last 2 weeks. Well, I'm disappointed I missed both of them, especially Lou. He seems to be your go-to fill-in when I'm missing. So I've yet to do a show with him, but how's it going? Thanks for holding down the fort.
Oh, absolutely. And it's great to have you back. Yeah, Lou and I have worked together in the past, so it's an easy phone call for me to make when you're going to be gone. And I did tell him that selfishly, I do expect him to come back and join the two of us. So it means that we get him more than once this season.
Yeah, I did a guest spot. Actually, spoiler, I was on a podcast since coming back, and that wasn't my own. And I guested with Steve Giswelli over at Wins Above Fantasy. And we joked over there too, because I have yet to do, I've done 3 guest spots on their show and never with both of them. And It's only when one of them is on honeymoon, which is weird because I've done 3 guest spots and each of them have only been married once. Van's getting the double dip in honeymoons, so lucky him.
Nice.
Hopefully the next time I'm over there, it's with both of them, or it's at least for a reason other than a honeymoon get. All right. Luckily for me, I'm coming in, getting my feet wet, getting acclimated once again. And I have the pleasure of making my return to the show and getting the added bonus of introducing our special guest this week, someone I've been itching to have on for a long time now. That's Chris Clegg. He joins us to break down some of the FAAB targets for this coming week, some prospect breakdowns, of course, and simply share in his company with us today, which is just lovely. Chris can be listened to alongside former guest of the show, Eric Cross, on the Fantrax Toolshed podcast. He's a senior baseball writer over at Fantrax and, of course, contributes at Fantasy Pros. Make sure you're following Chris on the Twitter to get updates on everything he's doing at Roto Clegg. That's Clegg with 2 G's. Chris, thanks so much for taking your Saturday night for joining us. How's it going in your neck of the woods?
Oh, man, it's been great. I'm very honored to be joining you guys. Love the show. I always love you guys' standard of audio is I'm like such an audio junkie, and you guys' audio is tremendous. So like that, like beyond the great content you guys put out, the audio, I just have to comment and say your audio is amazing. I love that. Love the show. So very honored to be joining you guys, chatting some waiver wire targets like you mentioned. And it's going to be a good time.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks for the comment on that. If you saw my setup right now, and you guys can only see the camera facing me, if I could turn the camera around, I am not in my best setting right now. I'm in a temporary apartment. Our house is being renovated, and I'm literally surrounded by these 2 foam triangles that are holding up a blanket around me just to try to keep as much sound contained instead of in this very empty white walled apartment that it would be echoing profusely if I didn't do something. I will take a picture at some point and throw that out there, but I appreciate you making the comment. one of these days, we had Scott Bogman on the show a couple of weeks ago or in the offseason, and I would like to get his co-host, Chris, who is, as audiophiles go, he's up there as anybody I know, and the quality he puts out there in this league is something I think most people try to strive for and come as close to as possible without actually hitting it. Shout out in that respect to him as well. All right, we are going to start it off with some news and notes as we like to do, and we'll get right into it. Kevin, we'll start with you. John Gray came back from the IL. Glenn Otto started on Friday. Spencer Howard is slated to go Sunday, and that's because John Gray is going back onto the IL. It's been reported that Gray may miss only one start, which is weird since he has to spend almost 2 weeks on the IL. He only missed one start in his last IL stint. Here we are. Otto is not rostered across all of TGFBI or the main event in those 15 teamers. Howard is rostered, but just in one team in TGFBI and just 13% of main event leagues. So do you expect either of these guys to be targeted in the next FAAB run due to the sheer opportunity that they're being given in the Rangers due to Gray's absence?
I think I'm holding out on my opinion on Spencer Howard. He's set to start Sunday, and it's been a pretty rocky start to the season. I had hope that he'd turn things around in Texas. I still do, but I'm still in wait and see mode. Glenn Otto, I have been a fan of ever since his debut when he threw 5 scoreless innings against the Astros last season. And I remember it vividly because from time to time I like to put a little bit of money on some games, and I had the Astros, like this rookie coming up for a spot start, and he had a brilliant performance. And then it was pretty rocky. He ended up with 6 starts at the major league level. 3 of them were really good, and 3 of them were absolutely horrible last season. He's been off to a great start in the minors, and then on Friday, 5 scoreless innings, just like we saw in his debut last season. And then his start this coming week does line up against the Astros. In those starts last season, one of them, as I mentioned, he was great against the Astros, and then he also got shelled by them in another start against the same Astros squad. Astros lineup has not been as intimidating thus far this season as it was last, and I think he had 134 strikeouts in 93 innings, something like that, last season at the AA and AAA levels combined for the Yankees and Rangers. So I have some optimism here. I think if I need a 6th or 7th starter in a league, I think I'd probably throw him out there this week, and I'm wait and see on Spencer Howard.
Yeah, that's fair. These two guys, as I'm writing up this note, regardless of the opportunity, maybe not my top priority for sure, but it's just whenever you see somebody getting that opportunity in what is now a pitcher-friendly park in Arlington, you got to at least take notice. All right, Chris, of course, I'm going to pick the first prospect news note to throw your way, and that's Roansy Contreras of the Pirates was optioned back down to AAA by the Pirates this week, rejoining teammate O'Neill Cruz in Indianapolis rather than what many, probably all 3 of us at least, would wish it would have been the opposite, and that would be Cruz joining Contreras in Pittsburgh. So what sort of realistic expectations should fantasy managers have for Contreras this season, and how long can you see yourself stashing him in different various formats, whether that be dynasty or redraft or 15-teamers, what have you?
He's the Pirates' best arm, in my opinion. And it's comical that he's being optioned when he's their best pitcher. And they're saying he's being optioned to be built up as a starter. And you saw the last 2 times out, he threw 3 innings and was pretty dominant in both those outings that we saw. The fastball is really stinking good. It gets up there, high velo. He throws it high in the zone very well, just blows it by hitters. Good movement, good life to it. Gets a lot of whiffs on it, for a 4-seam fastball. That slider is an excellent pitch as well. It's frustrating because it felt like he could have stretched out the innings and built up at the major league level, while getting that experience. I don't quite get what they're doing, but again, it's the Pirates. So while everybody else is bringing up their prospects and utilizing them and letting them play every day, here are the Pirates sending O'Neill Cruz down after a dominant spring, and then Contreras pitching well at the major league, but hey, let's option him so he can build up his innings. I'll be curious how long this lasts. Obviously, if they're serious about winning, he should be in the rotation, but I'm not sure that's the case for the Pirates right now. So we'll see. The way they talk about this move is that the expectations are clear. It's direct message to Contreras. He needs to build up the innings and come back as a starter. I'm not sure how long I want to hold on to him, especially in the NFBC format where you have just the 7 bench spots. It's tough. The talent level's there, and I think he can produce. But yeah, I think especially in the 12-team format, you've got to cut because he could be down longer than expected. But his 15-team makes it a little tougher just because of the depth and the talent level of Contreras. But at the same time, like, how long will this actually last? And I think that uncertainty makes it tough to hold on to him for too long. You have to play it by ear. If you have a pretty healthy roster, I think you can potentially hold on to him in a 15-team. But if you need arms, then it may be a pretty tough cut for Contreras this week.
Yeah, man. In those deeper ones, I feel if you have the flexibility all around, then fine. Hold on to him as long as you possibly can. But more than likely in this day and age, he's one of the first cuts that I'm considering when I want to hold on to 2 other guys that are on the IL or a different stash that I think is going to come up in this next week or two because of the time manipulation date coming up. So I feel like that I'm personally, I go on both sides of this. Like, I'm upset that Pittsburgh can't just stretch him out in Pittsburgh because a pitcher only has so many bullets in the gun, right? You might as well get as much out of it at the major league level than at the minor league level. His clock is technically, they could still manipulate it long enough where he'll get the extra year of eligibility, and they probably will. I think he was only up for 1 appearance last year, and he didn't start the first couple of days of this season. So I think they only need to keep him down for probably another 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll get the extra year of eligibility out of him as well. But I'm also on the other side of that. I live in Indianapolis, and the Pirates AAA facility is right here in Indianapolis. So I'm not going to be opposed to seeing Contreras pitch. O'Neal Cruz is playing shortstop and or outfield, but Contreras pitching a lot better than Cruz is hitting at the moment in AAA. So when I finally get up to a game, the game I was supposed to go to last week got rained out. And so we'll see how that happens into the future. All right, but let's move on. Kevin's to continuing with the news of negativity. Steven Duggar hits the IL for the Giants, and he won't be an option for the foreseeable future. Lamont Wade Jr. was already at the time of Duggar's departure. He wasn't ready, excuse me. And so who are you looking at to get added reps in the outfield for San Francisco? And honestly, because of San Francisco's history of platooning and what have you, does it really matter?
It kind of matters, and it kind of doesn't, because the Giants are set to face a lot of right-handed starting pitching this week. So I was already looking at where Jock Pederson is available, and he's only rostered in 32% of online championships, 100% rostered in the 15-team main events. So the shallower your league gets, the much more possibility there is that Jock Pederson is available. It kind of cements his spot in the starting lineup against the righties this week for sure. And it looks like Luis Gonzales is the other outfielder that may benefit here. He's only got 5 or 6 major league plate appearances in his career, 3 home runs already at AAA this season, so something to keep an eye on. But the guy I'm looking at in the 12-team leagues and shallower is definitely Jock Pederson.
Yeah, he's been playing pretty much every day, even throughout this week, never mind with the matchups that he's going to be seeing next week, as you mentioned. As long as he's continuing to face off against righties, you'll be happy to have him in your lineup. As soon as he faces that lefty, though, hopefully you're in a daily league and you can pull him out. All right, Chris, I heard on the NESN broadcast, of the Red Sox game this past Thursday, the crew mentioned that Garrett Whitlock would be given Tanner Houck's rotation spot for their upcoming series in Toronto, as Houck will not be able to travel with the team across the border due to his unvaccinated status. And Whitlock, of course, started today in what ended up being a almost just about complete game combined no hitter on the Tampa side, and Whitlock only gave up 1 hit of his own through, I think, 4 innings. He is slated to start again in Toronto, with Houck getting the piggyback start, not following Rich Hill on Sunday. At least that's how it's been scheduled. So first off, is Whitlock going to be in your active rotation where you have him this week for the start in Toronto? And secondly, on top of that, are you worried each week when Toronto is hosting a new team, not knowing who may travel and who may not, unless you have been collecting some kind of list that I would love to hear about.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely not aware of that list. I am going to start Garrett Whitlock where I have him, even though I think we think about this Toronto lineup and how tough it is. But honestly, right now, they're a little beaten up, and I think it's a prime opportunity. We saw Whitlock today just look dominant. He's been locked in the past few outings and only threw 48 pitches today. And I really thought he could have gone deeper, but still, he was highly impressive. He had a 44% CSW. He had a 48% whiff rate. Pretty crazy numbers here. The fastball velo was actually up in a longer stint, which I love to see. He just had everything working, and it feels like the start of him really being pushed into a constant rotation spot, at least consistent rotation spot. And we'll see if he can build on this and just build up his innings, because he's got the stuff to either be a high-end starter or he could be an elite closer. But there's so many people in the back end of that bullpen where I think it benefits the Sox the most right now to have him as a starter. And this is the opportunity. So he had a great start today. You go out and pitch well against Toronto. Maybe if he gives you 60, 65 pitches, like I would say that's a win. And he give you really solid ratios, solid strikeouts as well. So I am starting him. As far as the Toronto situation, it's certainly tough because there are so many unknowns on a week-to-week basis. Houck's been one we've been aware of for some time. It's just been a waiting game to them actually to confirm, per se, that he wasn't going to travel. So it's something to monitor pretty closely to see. But yeah, you're right. It is tough. And hopefully we know these things. We at least know like which players may not travel like before lineups lock. At least it's pretty terrible. You get a later week game in Toronto and you find out one of your key players is, oh, he's not traveling. Great. So yeah, the sooner the better. And I think with Houck, it's been one where we've all known. It's just a matter of formality now of knowing he's not going.
Yeah, it's gonna affect your FAAB bidding, especially for the, as you mentioned, those later, the second half of the week. So Houston is traveling into Toronto. If you've got any Houston players that you're not 100% sure about, you've got to make considerations for bidding on some backups that can fill their spots, because you'll still be able to fill their lineup if it's an offensive player. Pitchers, whole nother story. If you're not sure Justin Verlander is going to travel or not, what do you do? That's a situation where you just got to scour the internet, look for the Mining the News from Zimmerman or anything you can find so you can make that educated decision. But if you got anybody in your lineup, make sure that you are considering bidding on some backups to fill that spot if you find yourself in that precarious situation come Friday. All right, Kevin, Lou Trevino had been on the shelf all week for the A's, giving way to Dany Jiménez to step into the closer role for Oakland. He wowed a whole 2,700 or so fans that showed up with an impressive outing on Thursday. First off, how many leagues will you not be getting Jiménez this weekend? And secondly, is this a situation for those two roster Trevino should be worried about once he gets back?
No, you're probably right. Getting that save and looking good. Jiménez will probably go for a higher FAAB amount than I'm willing to pay. I'll put some bids out there and probably some lesser bids on Acevedo just in case. However, to getting to the second part of your question, this job is Trevino's in my mind. Because of the way Oakland operates, Trevino's getting traded this summer. And they're just going to bolster his trade value if he can continue to accumulate some saves. So I think he gets the rollback as soon as he returns.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, though, if Jiménez is somebody we'll talk about later when we talk about closer stashes and what have you. Is he somebody worth stashing now, knowing or assuming he'll have that role come July or even early August? I'm not sure that that should be the strategy, holding on to a guy like that for as long 3 or 4 months. But at the same time, he's not hurting you. If you do in a pinch, you do actually have to fill in your rotation with Jiménez. He's not hurting you in any other categories. He might not get a save for a couple months because it's Trevino's job, but he's not hurting you anywhere else.
And neither is AJ Puck. And that's who I have on some rosters with that same thought in mind. If he continues to get higher leverage situations as the season progresses, he's listed third on the reliever chart on Roster Resource at the moment, but he's been stellar so far. And when we know with him, it's all about health. If Puck stays healthy, I think he's the one we see in that spot.
There you go. the next Josh Hader, right? That was what he was.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. All right, Chris, your Braves pulled off a trade. They got Jesse Chavez in exchange for Sean Newcomb. Sean Newcomb is no longer an Atlanta Brave after I think he just brought him up from the restricted list, and then they traded him the next day, if I'm not mistaken. Honestly, I'm not sure why I put this on here. I had to put some Atlanta notes in here. I know you're an Atlanta guy. And so tell me, is there anything to this? Should I care? Or is this am I just filling the void?
If you're a Braves fan, you should just be happy you don't have to see Sean Newcomb go out there and blow things up again. Sean Newcomb is the pitcher that the Braves put in when they go down 8-0 in the second inning. They're just like, all right, here you go. Just do your thing. So I guess
there's some honor to that.
Yeah, I guess so. In that sense, it sucks to not have him because he's just that kind of role. But gosh, you put him in a close game, you never want to see that. And unfortunately, I've been at too many Braves games where he's ended up pitching and blows the game. So I won't miss that at all. So not Chavez is much better, but hey, at least Newcomb's off the roster.
There you go. Yeah, I always have this clear memory of the 2004 ALCS Game 3. And I'm a Red Sox fan, and the Red Sox were being pummeled in Game 3, and Tim Wakefield came in, and his job was to just pitch. Don't care what happens, just pitch. And he went 2 or 3 innings and he just pitched. He just saved the rest of the bullpen and the rest of the rotation so that obviously they could do much better the next 4 games of that series. So that's why I say there's some honor to that. And if you're coming in now, Newcomb maybe doesn't have as much honor there, but that's okay. All right, Kevin, we got 2 more notes here that just came in today. I want to make sure I touched on them. And unfortunately, it looked like Eloy Jiménez hit the first base bag pretty hard during Saturday's game. He left the game. And so he hasn't officially been placed on the IL as of the time of this recording yet, but it sure looks like he's going to be placed. It's just a matter of how long he'll be out for. Tell me, is this finally going to be the opportunity, just like it was last year, that Andrew Vaughn gets more regular playing time from Tony La Russa, or does Tony La Russa just have too much of a grudge for whatever reason?
I really hope so. And he's universally rostered, Andrew Vaughn, in 15-team main events on NFBC and also 12-team online championships. He's only 61% rostered on Yahoo, and that's exactly what you're alluding to. It's due to the playing time. He's got 36 plate appearances on the season. He should have 50 to 60 plate appearances like the everyday players do at this point. I would grab him in the shallow leagues, the 40% of them or so where he is available, and hope this is the case. I'm just afraid we're going to be really frustrated when we see more Leury Garcia and Adam Engel out there.
Yeah, man, it's every instance of Andrew Vaughn. Oh, he's taking reps at second base. Oh, he might get some third base reps now that Moncada's out. But they find ways to fill those holes with somebody else. Leury Garcia is batting second, somewhat regular basis, it seems, or at least he's moved up to that spot. It sure seems Tony La Russa will do anything he can to not get Vaughn where he's supposed to be. It's not like he was a top 3 overall pick or anything.
Yeah, and our friend Mike Kurland tweeted yesterday before Eloy Jimenez's injury today that we're ready to see Leury Garcia and Adam Engel hitting second and third in the White Sox lineup. And gosh, that's probably what's coming, unfortunately.
All right, let's finish it off, Chris. We got down in Tampa Bay. Rumors are that Vidal Bruján is on his way to St. Petersburg. He's supposed to be added to the Rays taxi squad. There's no definite that he'll be activated on the actual roster yet, but we saw this with Mackenzie Gore recently in San Diego, and you get jumped onto the taxi squad, and then you're the first man up, and you get in there as soon as possible. With all the supposed COVID issues that Tampa's been seeing, not seeing a lot of players. I think Francisco Mejia was the one that kind of popped out to me recently. Not going to affect Bruján, but do you expect Bruján to get at least more of a run than he did last season when he was pretty much up and then right back down?
Yeah, that was the frustrating thing. I don't know why they brought him up to sit him on the bench. And, I was concerned about Josh Lowe with the same thing this year where they would just bring him up and let him waste away. But he's played every day, which has been encouraging. If they're going to call Bruján up, he's got to play, in my opinion. Like, you shouldn't just let him sit and waste. I understand needing the bodies in this situation. If they were to have a little COVID outbreak, hopefully Bruján gets the chance to play every day. He's one that's kind of fallen a little bit for me as far as like prospect status. He's been just hitting the ball on the ground too much the last 2 years. Like that's been a major thing for a player that lacks power like he does. He's got to get the ball in the air a little more often. And we haven't really seen that. And even this year in AAA, it has a ground ball rate of 57.1%, still sporting a 294 average and a 455 OBP, 3 stolen bases. That's his specialty. We know that if he's up and he gets on base, then he has a chance to steal because he's lightning quick. He's an easy 70 grade runner here, potentially even higher than that, a true elite stolen base threat here. It's just how he fits in. I don't know exactly where he fits in the picture. He can play center field. He can play second base. He can play shortstop. We know second and short are occupied by Brandon Lau and Wander Franco, and center field being Kevin Kiermaier. How much longer does Tampa Bay continue to run out Kiermaier? I don't really know. He's not that great of a player anymore. He's obviously not a great hitter. We know that, but he does provide a little value with his glove. But I'd love to see Bruján get a chance. I'm just not sure that he gets that immediately. I feel like the Rays have tried to trade Kiermaier. Maybe they can, maybe they will, to get him the chance. I feel like Bruján's got to be better than Kiermaier at this point, but we'll see.
Part of me just thinks that Tampa has been spoiled too many times with the trades that they've made and the returns that they've been getting, and they're just holding out for that with Kiermaier. Yeah. Because it totally seems like he's head of the rumor mill every single year, whether it's at the trade deadline or in the offseason. More prevalently with Tampa, it's usually around the offseason, and they just cannot get rid of him. And I think it's more likely that opening in center field opens up because Kiermaier hits the shelf with another injury than it does him being traded, and odds on that are typically pretty high. If he went on the IL during this recording, would anybody here be surprised? And even though the game's over, I doubt I doubt any of us would be too surprised about that. All right, that's going to do it for our news and notes section of the pod. We're going to get into some prospect talk. Of course, we got Chris on here. We got to talk about some prospects, and with the supposed time manipulation date coming up next week, we're wondering if we'll see some extra call-ups in the next week and a half. But before we do that, we're going to take this quick break.
Hey, Alex Fast here, and thanks for listening to this podcast on the Pitcher List Podcast Network. If you're a fan, consider supporting all of us by getting a PL Plus subscription, where you're going to get an ad-free website and get access to our Discord, where you can talk to all of our podcast hosts and staff. Plus, you can hang out with our incredible Pitcher List community. It's basically a baseball sanctuary year-round for as low as $8 a month. You can sign up at pitcherlist.com/plus, and you're going to get your first month free with promo code podcast. Also, don't forget to check out everything else we do as well, from YouTube videos, live streams, newsletters, off-season articles, TikToks, breakdowns, over 15 baseball podcasts on our network. We can't stop talking about baseball even during the off-season. So sign up for PL Plus today at pitcherlist.com/plus and use promo code podcast to get your first month free. All right. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the show.
All right, of course, we are back, and we are talking with Chris Clegg of Fantrax, and of course, myself and Kevin Hasting. We are going to talk a little bit about prospects and who we might be expecting to come up. It seems as though everybody and their cousin actually made their debut this year, whether it be on the opening day or very shortly right after that, whether it be CJ Abrams being added to the roster at the last possible second, or expected Bobby Witt Jr. being all but announced weeks prior. So not all of them, Chris, have been hitting the ground running, which everybody warns you about, right? Going into a season like, yeah, all the hype over X, Y, and Z, but most of them struggle. Mike Trout struggled when he first got called up. Vlad struggled when he first came up. Even Wander, for the first week, struggled when he came up. They all can't hit the ground running like Jordan did or anything like that. So talk to me about which prospects do you see struggling in the first 2.5 weeks of the season that you are legitimately concerned about either getting sent back down or sent down for the first time, in the case of sent down to AAA for the first time, like in Julio Rodriguez or CJ Abrams didn't even hit AAA yet, or just losing playing time or just not figuring it out?
You have to think that Julio Rodriguez could be at some risk while there's a lot of factors going against him right now. You probably seen on Twitter at this point where people constantly complaining about him getting these called third strikes out of the zone. And that's a real thing. He's been squeezed pretty badly, but still, if we're not producing, then I don't know. It's tough to see him keeping this, especially as you mentioned, a 21-year-old that skipped AAA, Kyle Lewis potentially coming back soon. But at the same time, you also have Jared Kelenic struggling as well. CJ Abrams is the one that I do think legitimately could be sent down. He wasn't ready, in my opinion, while Rodriguez much more ready. Abrams coming off a major injury last season. This seemed like such a desperation move by the Padres, just to get him up there to try to force something. It's not like they could just continue to open up the checkbook and get the next guy. When Tatis went down, they've ponied up for several big contracts recently, and couldn't really see them doing that right now. So they thought Abrams was the solution. To me, just not quite ready. He needs a little more seasoning, and that's okay. That's not to say anything negative about Abrams, who was very good at AA last year before getting hurt. But to me, when you're coming back from injury like this, to me, you need more reps in AAA. So I could see him going down to AAA and getting some work there. So Abrams, I think, is at risk. And it's interesting. Most of these top guys have really struggled. Actually, every single one of these top prospects that are in the majors right now are struggling. Some of the rookies that are performing well aren't the huge name guys, but for the most part, all of them are struggling. And I think that's normal. I think people put too high of expectations on them. Not everybody comes up and is Juan Soto or Ronald Acuna Jr. and hits the ground running and is just elite from day one. There's such a transitional period for prospects when they do get called up. Major league pitching's so different. They can attack hitters so much differently than minor leaguers. Not to say that's anything against a minor league pitcher, but there's a reason that the pitchers are in the major leagues, and we see them just be able to attack these hitters a lot differently. Velocity's higher, command's better, spin stuff, all that stuff is better for pitchers in the major league. So we often see these hitting prospects especially come up and struggle. I do think that with time, we'll see these guys be fine. I really do think Julio Rodriguez will be fine. I think Bobby Witt Jr. will be fine. Every one of these guys is going to be okay in the long run. But this year, I could see some concern, especially early on as we're talking. It's a small sample, but it's still something to factor in because a lot of these guys were moving up draft boards considerably towards the end of draft season, especially once we found out Rodriguez was going to make the roster. Bobby Witt was going very high in drafts. So you paid a pretty big capital for some of these players, and they're not performing. So what do? It puts you in a tough spot, but I think you have to hold, at least for now, knowing it's a small sample. There will be an adjustment period, but it makes it tough, especially, if you have a shallow bench and you need players that are performing. So it does make it tough with prospects, but as always, there's an adjustment period. I think they'll be okay. I'm not overly worried about many of these guys, other than Abrams is one who I do think could be sent down just from the standpoint of he just needs more work at the minor league level, in my opinion, because he didn't really get that last year, and just the jump was pretty significant.
Yeah, he's up for a very specific reason in San Diego, and when that reason is no longer exists, when Tatis comes back, where does he even play? He was called up and didn't even play in the opening day game. A prospect of his caliber and his name, and everybody was just chomping at the bit to see him, and they didn't even play him. So there's an obvious reason why he's there. Kevin, you talk about a lot about the aggressiveness that you see yourself about dropping players, something you got from 2020, you carried over to 2021, and you expect to carry over to 2022. How does that aggressiveness to drop either underperformers or players that you don't expect to figure it out and be a positive impact to your roster in these prospects this early on in the season, depending on, like Chris said, depending on the draft capital that maybe you put in, or maybe you're not putting any stock into the capital that you put in?
I think it's even harder right now this season at this particular time with how dead the baseball is. How much is that contributing to some of these guys' struggles? Because a lot of people are struggling that aren't rookies. So that makes it much more difficult right now. So I think, at least right now, I'm still holding on to these guys, at least for a couple more weeks. We got to see what happens with this ball. I don't think they can keep it this way. We had the whole ban on sticky stuff last year because pitchers were dominating too much. And we supposedly the humidor in every stadium was supposed to help in some ballparks with the ball movement, and the run scoring environment, even when you adjust for ballparks and weather and everything at the time of year, is down so much that this is not going to stay this way. And I expect something to change relatively soon.
Don't tell the Cubs this, by the way. They did not get the memo.
21 today. Exactly. That was absolutely crazy. So I think in most years, with the intentions I had coming into the season, as you said, of being willing to cut bait sooner on players, I probably would be considering it at this point with some of these guys. But due to this deadened ball, I'm putting it off for a couple of weeks.
Not just about dropping players. Like, what about just not starting them? That's
where I'm at. Yeah, I'm not starting a lot of these guys. I have a team with Bobby Witt Jr. and Julio Rodriguez on it. They're both on my bench.
It's hard, man. That's a hard thing to do when you're trying to be disciplined. And that's probably some of the best advice that we could probably give is just not only disciplined in your draft, but stay disciplined in your roster construction throughout the course of the season. And that's your active roster and your bench construction. Don't be afraid just because, like, I drafted Bobby Witt in plenty of 5th round, 6th round, 7th round, depending on the format. And I don't have a problem putting him on my bench and hoping that my, 15th or 20th round backup, my middle infielder who's shortstop eligible, can fill in the gap where Bobby Witt's not doing. Yes, of course, he could figure it out at any time. And you could miss out on that half a week of production. That's in a hitter's scenario. That's the worst case scenario. You miss out on 3 games of just what you think Bobby Witt could do or what J-Rod could do or whatever. In the pitcher, you miss 1 start. Like, it's more likely it's a rotation spot. And so don't be afraid to stash them on your bench, even though you paid high draft capital for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fear. Everybody has that fear of missing out. And you might miss a couple of home runs and a couple of stolen bases from a guy, but hopefully that's, even if he's on your bench, that's a good sign of things to come, and you get him in there once you see it happen.
It's like when we talk about when we talk about looking for pitchers that are going to have 2 starts, not this week, but next week, you're bidding on them in FAAB now to stash them on your bench. You're not bidding on them to start them. Like, your prospects and your guys that you did all this research for over the offseason, you got to trust yourself on that a little bit and hold on to them. Just put them on your bench and see what they can do, and they can get it back up. But you don't have to start them in your starting lineup every single week. Let's go the other side, Chris. Like, who, first of all, of the ones that are, you named a couple names that you might be, you said CJ Abrams you're worried about. J-Rod is a worry, but who started off slow that you're just not worried about at all? They could turn around yesterday and you wouldn't be surprised.
Honestly, like, most of them I feel that way. Spencer Torkelson's one who we've seen him coming around now. He's getting to the power, which is great to see. He's making better contact, and that progression has been good. I think we see Julio Rodriguez get there too. He's just been very passive, and his discipline is so good, which has led to those strikeouts, just getting deeper into counts. And he's selective. He knows the strike zone so well, and he's just been getting squeezed by it. He just got to swing and be more aggressive. The good thing is he's got 4 stolen bases already, which is impressive. He runs really well, and he defies like everything about like sprint speed per se. Like, he was like a 50 grade runner who got better throughout his time in the minor leagues, where he just got faster, and he's got such a will to run. And you look, and he's continued to hit the ball hard, like multiple batted balls over 110 miles an hour. I haven't updated my exit velocity database, but he had ranked top 5 in 80th percentile exit velocity through last Wednesday, I think was the last time I had updated. So he was like top 5 overall among all hitters. So hitting the ball hard, just got to get some balls to fall. And he's going to get to his power. He's going to get to home runs. I think Bobby Witt does as well. So all these guys are going to be okay. But I don't know. It depends on the leash for the teams, what they're willing to do with these players. But I think for the most part, you're going to see all these guys get a shot to continue to play every day, unless it's just absolutely horrific.
All right, let's talk about the rookies that aren't special. Spencer Torkelson or Julio Rodriguez, the Stephen Kwans of the world, the Jeremy Peñas of the world, the Bryson Scotts of the world, who I think a lot of us took a lot of chances on them making the opening day roster, but they're still not the top pedigree. They might be on a top 100 list here, there, or whatnot, but they're not Spencer Torkelson. You know, of these guys, and feel free to throw out some names that I didn't just throw off the top of my head, but who have started really hot, like Stephen Kwan, all the rage on Twitter. Which one of them do you think is going to cool off? Could be tomorrow and then forever. And which one do you think is completely legitimate and we should be expecting to see this the remainder of the year?
I think we've seen Kwan cooling off a little bit, where he was all the craze, like you mentioned, for a little while. And I do think Kwan's a good player. We know Kwan has elite contact skills, but he's not really getting to much else right now. And he has been slowing down a bit. That's to be expected when you start as hot as he did. And people blew a ton of FAAB on him. But you look recently, even over the last week, he's still hitting 313. That's pretty impressive. Hasn't been playing as much, but still, that's not a big deal to me. I just don't think he gets to as much power as people think, and he's not going to steal many bases. So Kwan, I think people will cool off. Like, it was like a huge overhype on him for a little bit, and then now there's like a huge overcorrection where I think people are going to drop him over the next couple of weeks, and then he settles in as a solid player. But I do think Jeremy Pena is very legit. He was highly underrated. I still feel like he is a little bit underrated, where people just didn't think he was going to get to any power, and he bulked up significantly last year, and he's getting to it. He's making good contact. He's making hard contact. Yep, the chase rate is a little concerning. He does like to get aggressive on pitches out of the zone. But that's okay. I mean, he's still just striking out at a 22% rate right now, which is good. He's hitting the ball extremely hard, like I mentioned. The crazy thing is he's going to make Astros fans forget about Carlos Correa, which is cold, but that's what he's doing right now.
You're already seeing the memes. Level. Oh, yeah. The memes are very prevalent.
Yep. And also factor in, he's still a high-end runner, too. I don't know how much he steals. The Astros just don't steal much in general. But if he wants to, he's capable of getting the stolen bases. So I firmly believe that Jeremy Pena is every bit legit. He could end up running away with a Rookie of the Year award, which is crazy. But I think he's just as talented as some of these top prospects, and he's proving it and performing at that level.
Yeah, what I liked about I grabbed Pena in a bunch of DCs and draft and holds. What I liked about him was obviously the opportunity he could be the starting shortstop for the Houston Astros, but also knowing that his defense was going to keep him on there, even if his bat did struggle to start the year. And he's going to, like a Matt Chapman's type, doesn't matter if he hits 212, he's still going to be playing third base every day. Pena, same thing. Pena hasn't really hit that, not yet anyway, but he's still going to be out there, especially since he is the option at shortstop for Houston as well. All right, we have a couple of mailbag questions, so I'm going to skip to this first one here we got, and this one came from our PL Discord. And Kevin, I'm going to throw this one your way to start. This comes from Little Piranha on our Discord. I'm going to read it verbatim. How does your budgeting strategy differ in FAAB redraft leagues depending on whether prospects need to be called up to be FAAB or signed? If the chances, he goes on to say, if the chances of a FAAB-a-palooza, which we've seen in the last couple of years, is low because of all of these prospects have already been called up to start the season, should we be considering spending more FAAB dollars in April and not holding that hammer later on? And he goes on to give some further context of his specific situation. I talked a little bit about this with Steve Giswelli over at Wins Above Fantasy, but definitely wanted to get a little bit more in depth because I've heard a lot of talk about this, whether it be on Twitter or just in our Discord or what have you. So Kevin, we know from listening to us that you're conservatively aggressive in your FAAB bidding, but knowing that Torkelson isn't going to come up in late April and you have to spend that money on him or somebody like that. Are you spending a little bit more aggressively per week, knowing you don't need to hold on to a hammer, or has this not really affected your bidding?
No, I think it adjusts things, especially now. It's like in a keeper league when you have inflation, that inflation all, in my mind, should go to the top players that are available. A $1 player is a $1 player. Spend the extra money on the elite players that are available. Same thing with FAAB. If I've stated several times, I have separately of my FAAB budget about 20% of my year's FAAB budget for the one time I want to jump on somebody. If I'm not going to need that, then I'm probably going to use that earlier in the season. My FAAB budget that I have stashed away for the last few weeks of the season are for injuries and the few guys that are going to be available. We don't see a lot of September call-ups anymore with the rosters not expanding as much. So I don't need a lot of money at the end of the year, but I need some. I don't think I need any more than I already have budgeted. So yeah, I would bump that up to use it now to try to acquire players for my rosters that I'll be able to reap the rewards of their production for a larger portion of the season.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense. If you're not going to see the time where Yordan Alvarez comes up in the summertime and you're like, oh, I'm glad I still have all this money. I can grab him for $400 or whatever. If you don't need to have that, of course, there's going to be players that make a name for themselves throughout the season, and all of a sudden they walk into more playing time or whatever. But it doesn't seem as though it's going to be with as much name recognition as we've seen in the past, for sure.
Yeah, and also for his particular question, where they can pick up prospects now. They don't need to be on a major league roster. He can grab them now. He mentioned Nolan Gorman grabbed for $1 last week with 7 home runs in 7 games. That'll do it. Grab.
Yeah.
Right? That was a really nice grab. Hang on to that for a little while. That's a good stash. So that even contributes to it more. If it's still an NFBC style, not every prospect is up. There's still some guys we may see this season. One guy I'm keeping an eye on, he started off really slow, like 0 for his first 4 games, but is steadily creeping up and has a couple of home runs now. Brennan Davis. The Cubs, we all thought they were just going to sell off everybody. They kept they still have Wilson Contreras. They went and signed Seiya Suzuki. They're actually spent a little bit of money. They're about a 500 team right now. If things continue to go well and they continue to put up 21 runs in a game, we might see Brennan Davis sooner than we expected earlier in the offseason.
I'm hoping, for the sake of all my underbids or my underbets, that those 21 run games are not going to be the new normal for the Cubs or anybody for that matter. All right. We talked about, you mentioned Nolan Gorman as somebody else that may be coming up soon as a good stash, especially he's literally doing what Yordan Alvarez did. And I'm just going to hit a home run every day until you call me up. So Chris, I'm going to put the pressure on you. Who's not up yet that you expect to be up next week after the quote unquote, the time manipulation deadline goes by?
I'm not sure that the Red Sox will do it, but Tristan Casas has been incredibly hot this year, and Bobby Dahlbeck has been absolutely terrible. So the Red Sox are a contending team, and they need to put their best players on the field. And at this point, Dahlbeck's not doing much blocking of Casas anymore, and they need to get Casas up. I'm not sure if it's realistic or not to come up in the next week or two, but he's certainly ready, and we've seen that time and time again. He mashes baseballs. He's got great control of the zone. He's not going to blow you away with batting average or anything, but he is a legit prospect, and I think he's more than ready to be up with the Sox. We'll see what the team wants to do, but I think it's highly possible that he does come up and get some run pretty soon, because he's got nothing left to prove anymore in AAA.
Yeah, as a Sox fan, I'd like to see it myself. I'm not sure what you do with Dahlbeck at that point, but then I would have said the same thing about Michael Chavis at one point or another. I don't know what you do with Chavis. Oh, that's right. You just send them to Pittsburgh. Sorry, Michael. Is there anybody that you think that you're hearing a lot of buzz that might come up that you're just like, I don't care. I don't think they're going to be helpful to my fantasy roster specifically. They might be the right call on the major league team to do, but it's not going to help me. Like what you talked about with Kwan. Yeah, he seems like a fun, exciting player, but I'm not sure that he's going to be helpful to my fantasy team. So you're pumping the brakes.
Yeah, that's tough. Because there's not been a lot of buzz about anybody coming up immediately. So that's been one of those where it's been quiet, where, it's hard to say for sure with who could come up soon other than the couple that we mentioned. And I don't know. That's a really tough thing to answer, where anybody could come up. Oftentimes we see these like random call-ups where it's, wow, that's surprising. Looking at my ETAs on my prospect list, I'm not seeing anyone that's, okay, like this person's like definitely up soon, but they're not going to make a fantasy relevant impact, which, I hate to give like a cop-out answer like that, but I'm not really seeing anyone that's significant that fits that right now.
That's fair. I think Nolan Gorman comes to mind as well for me in that realm, just because I drafted him a couple places thinking he has a possibility of being one of the other guys that makes the opening day roster. But once they came out and said that he's not going to be on the roster if he's not going to play every day, that hurt. He's like, all right, then when does he finally come up? Do they need a major injury? Do they need to make a trade? Something has to happen. And that doesn't necessarily mean this coming week, because nothing's happened. That's going to necessitate him getting everyday playing time just because he's doing well. Is that a bad reason to give somebody playing time? No, absolutely not. But there's no guarantee that he continues to do that, obviously, in St. Louis rather than at AAA.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that Tommy Edman's been really
not
so
bad.
far.
Yeah, not bad at baseball.
and where their outfield set, like it's not like you just slide Edman in the outfield, because they've got 3 really solid outfielders out there, unless they're just giving up on Dylan Carlson already, which seems crazy. And they're blocked on the corners with Goldschmidt and Arenado, so it just puts Gorman in that really tough spot. But what do you do? Could Edman play short? Maybe, but it would be interesting to see like how he fits in this picture.
Could and should are very different words when it comes to position playing them. All right, we got one more mailbag question. Chris, I'm going to direct this toward you specifically. So this comes on Twitter from Anthony Gialdi, who says, if the ball is, quote, dead, does this change the outlook for some of the power hitting prospects? Should fantasy players consider contact hitters more in the new environment? And will rookie pitchers now have a better chance at making an immediate impact?
The last question is an easy yes. And I think we've seen rookie pitchers performing at a higher level than we have than hitters, at least. While you look at like Hunter Green and Reed Detmer's stat lines, and even like Nick Lodolo, not overly impressive, but they've still pitched really well. There's been a lot of good come out of them, at least from what we've seen. You've seen other guys thrive, where you have Yohan Duran, who's dominating in the bullpen. Matt Brash has been really good. There's other guys. You can go down the list, and rookie pitchers have honestly outperformed rookie hitters so far, which has been impressive. I think that this puts more of an emphasis on players with bigger power. And even up until this season started, we talked about how power is so plentiful and it's easy to find, but that's been a different story this year. So I think that your true power hitters may stand out even more, while speed seems a little easier to find, which is the total opposite of everything we thought. Now, I'll be interested to see if this trend does continue. Like, the MLB could just change the ball again, because we've seen them prone to do that.
And they will. Yeah.
People will complain. The fans will get bored. They'll be, all right, let's put the happy fun ball back. And I'm sure that's going to happen. But I think if the dead ball stuck, then I think you have to think about more power hitters like a Tristan Casas. He's one who stands out, because if your fringe average power hitter is losing, let's say 10 feet of fly ball distance, that's pretty significant. But for Casas, someone with monster raw power, that doesn't affect him as much. So I think it places a little more emphasis on hitters with that big power, and says their power is more likely to stick, if the ball does stick, is the dead ball.
Let's also keep in mind that it is April, and in most baseball stadiums, it's cold. It's not sunny. It's rainy. There's been a bunch of postponed games already this season, as we see a lot in April, especially in the northern half of the country. And so weather will get better. It will warm up in places like Baltimore, and even the game in LA and the Angels game last night, it was like in the 50s, I think. It was a night game, granted, but it still happens. Like, the weather's going to change, and that's going to affect the baseball as well. And I'm in agreement. The ball's going to change again, and it's just going to be ridiculous. Or they'll run out of this current dead ball, and they'll just, we ran out of balls, so we have to get a different ball now. So we'll see how that affects it. The problem is we won't know until it happens, or you won't know until like a week after it happens. At least we can take solace in knowing that there are a ton of people out there right now that are literally tracking this one thing. And so you should probably be paying attention to that. All right, Chris, I appreciate getting your insight into this situation that we see with prospects going into the week 4 FAAB period, as we start seeing maybe a handful more prospects make their way up after their time manipulation comes up. Even if it's not the O'Neal Cruzes of the world, too, a lot of people are still stashing from draft season. It'll be interesting and fun to see who actually makes their way up after getting that, and then who gets pushed back all the way to Super 2. So we'll have this whole conversation come, I think, June-ish. It's always that mystery deadline that nobody ever knows when it is until after the season's over. You just guess that it's like early June. All right, so let's get right into FAAB. That's why we're here. We got some recommendations to make for those looking to, get an edge in different categories. And we typically say, I think, Kevin, we typically say, like, usually after Memorial Day is when you really want to start hunkering down where you're standing in each category. But really, if you've got certain category deficiencies now, you should be getting whatever you can to fill those voids. So we're going to continue to break these things down by category, and we start off with power. And I filled mine in a little later than you guys, so I was surprised to see this. Nobody was going to mention them unless you were just keeping them in your back pocket. And that is Alec Bohm is still available in a vast majority of leagues. And I'm talking, he's only rostered in 66% of main event leagues, 27% rostered in online championships, 37% on Yahoo. We always say most Yahoo leagues are daily moves leagues. So as players start heating up, people can move on him a little bit faster than obviously in the NFBC and other weekly FAAB formats. But Joe Girardi came out on Friday, and they mentioned that Bohm is going to be his starting third baseman moving forward. At the beginning of the season, that was not the case. The beginning of the season was only 3 weeks ago. And so I think that's the uncertainty is why he's not rostered more. I have every expectation that he will be rostered 100% across the board, at least in those 15 teamers and close to it in those online championships, based on the fact that he's just producing in the limited time that he's already had. Believe it or not, Alec Bohm ranks first in K percentage throughout the course of this very short beginning of this season. Not something I expect to hold up, but the fact that it's there right now is pretty amazing. He is 12th overall in Major League Baseball in hard contact percentage. So if you're looking over at his player profile over at pitcherlist.com, you'll see it's hard contact percentage, not hard hit percentage, based on plate appearances, not batted ball event. And between his name recognition, his third base eligibility, is now having an everyday role and making peace with the fans in Philadelphia and maybe not hating every moment of his life in that city. I'm curious, how much do you think a guy like this goes for? And this is past his prime prospect, if you will, prospect status, but is somebody who has the name recognition from being a top prospect on top prospects list, and obviously did not perform that well last year. Do you guys expect him to be going for, at the very least, triple digits in the majority of the leagues where you see him available? Kevin, is this a guy that you're not going to get?
Probably, but also it's the kind of guy that can sneak through. There's such a negative taste in people's mouths after last season, and like you said, it's surprising that he's available at all, and that's the reason. So if people still aren't recognizing what's happening so far, sure, he should probably go for triple digits in most of the leagues that he's available, but he won't in all of them. So that's why when I say I'm probably not going to end up with him, I'm still putting bids out there because there's a chance that you could sneak through.
Yeah, this is the guy you put in, at the very least, you put a keep your honest bid on there. So nobody should be getting him for $20-$30. It's make sure you're putting in that keep your honest, maybe even $60-$75, and make sure somebody's getting him for triple digits. If you're going to get somebody.
I was in the 90s in the places Josh Lowe was available and didn't end up with him anywhere.
Oh, sure.
But I could do that for Bohm.
You're just forcing somebody's hands. Okay, if you want him, you better be going over 100. All right, that's my one guy here in this category. Chris, we'll move it over to you. Who might you be looking at if you need some power?
I'm going a little deeper here. Go with Daniel Vogelbach. He's hardly rostered anywhere, and he's coming off a really strong week. He's rostered 15% of mains, just 1% of online championships, and probably virtually unrostered on Yahoo, I'd assume, if 1% of OCs. But he's been leading off for the Pirates. While it's not a great lineup, and you mentioned they got beat 21-0 today, he's still managing to get some power in there and playing every day. Like, you can't beat plate appearances. Like, that plate appearances are king at the end of the day, and you're getting that. And he's hitting for solid average, surprisingly, and leading off every day against right-handed hitters. Even against lefties, he's playing, still hitting the top of that lineup, which is huge. And he's going to sneak some power in. He's maybe not driving as many runs when he's in the leadoff spot. That's probably the biggest frustration. He has 3 home runs this year, 5 RBI. Obviously, he's still going to strike out a lot, part of his game. But if you're desperate for power in a deeper league, I don't think Vogelbach's a bad option here.
I've been following a lot of lineups, not as many lineups as like McCurlin does or what have you, but I'm focusing specifically on leadoff hitters, and I just keep seeing Vogelbach at the top of that lineup, and it's amazing to see every single day. love it when a plan comes together, and I'm sure that's exactly what the Pirates had planned on when they brought him on board. But yeah, if you're going to get those added plate appearances, that it should be a target of anybody who's in need of that position. Kevin, who are you looking at for a power boost this coming week?
Yeah, I want to give a quick mention. That he's in leagues where you play 5 outfielders. Doesn't matter the league size, I don't think. But if you're playing 5 outfielders, Jesús Sánchez is rostered already, but he's available in over a quarter of Yahoo leagues, and he should be rostered even when we're only starting 3 outfielders in a 10 or 12 team league. He's been that good. He's hitting over 350 now after Saturday. I don't expect that to continue, but even if he trends towards the 250 that he hit last season, the power is there, and we know it. I remember one of the things that stuck with me the most from First Pitch Arizona this last year was when you're talking about young players and that some of them have flaws, pick the one that is a freak athlete, and Jesús Sánchez is a freak athlete, and we're seeing that so far this season. So he's rostered in most deeper leagues, but in the shallow leagues, he should be rostered where he's not. For a little bit deeper leagues, Maikel Franco is playing every single day. He is 89% rostered in 15-team main event leagues, but only 16% in online championships. So in 12-team leagues, he's available in most of them. And he is playing very similarly right now to what he did in 2020 when he had 38 RBI in that shortened 2020 season. He is among the lead leaders right now in RBI. He's looking at the same pace that 2020 would have had if it was a full season, 20 home runs and close to 100 RBI. That's the player he's looking like right now, with a batting average not only, like we used to say, won't hurt you, but for what we're seeing so far this season, a 260 or 270 batting average is phenomenal.
Yeah, I think the batting average across the league right now is like 231, and that's the lowest it's ever been. Granted, yes, 3 weeks in, but still, it's pretty sad. All right, we got some power options there, so let's move on to some speed. And one of the guys I'm going to be looking at every single week when I'm looking for some speed is Austin Hedges. Not because he's going to be the one stealing bases, but because he's the one that's going to be letting the stolen bases go by. Austin Hedges is really bad, if you guys haven't had noticed, but he's bad on both sides of the plate, from behind it and at it. And how he's prevented anybody from stealing base at this point, I'm not quite sure, but runners have taken over 8% of their opportunities that when Hedges has been behind the plate. That's the 4th highest of any starting catcher. 8% doesn't seem like a really large number, but when it comes to how many times you actually try to steal second when it's open, that's a pretty large number, especially when it comes to comparing different catchers. He's allowed 7 stolen bases already. That was going into Saturday. I don't know if he allowed one today. I didn't check. It could be higher than that at this point. And Tony Kemp is who I'm targeting this week, even though the A's only have a 5-game slate. And I think that's actually a positive thing because it'll keep his price down. I'm not going after any hitters that isn't going to play in the first half of the week. I'm only getting Tony Kemp to steal me a base, and I only need 3 days of him to do it, whether it's in my middle infield spot or second base, because he has that eligibility in addition to outfield. He's not available in any of your deeper leagues, 100% rostered main event, but less than half online championships are rostering him currently. So he's more than likely available for what you're looking for. And then next week, they do face off against Tampa Bay. And with Francisco Mejia is on the COVID IL, Mike Zunino should be doing most of the catching if Mejia stays for an elongated period of time. And he does not have a history himself of being all that great at throwing runners out, at least through last year as well. Tony Kemp, not a deep league option, but like I always say, check your free. Just because he's 100% rostered in the main event doesn't mean he's 100% rostered in your deep league. So keep an eye out for him. Kevin, who are you looking at to maybe throw in a steal, or in this case, maybe 2 or 3?
I'm looking for Thairo Estrada here. I was kind of surprised at his availability. He's playing second base every day for the Giants. The Giants have become the next Tampa, and everybody platoons. Estrada's playing every day, and he stole his 3rd base of the season today. He doesn't have a history of a ton of stolen bases. He did steal double digits in the minors a time or two, but 3 stolen bases in 2 weeks is something. Might have been 4 if there hadn't have been a hit. I don't know if anybody saw the Nationals, Alcides Escobar and others getting really upset that he was attempting to steal second base, and then it ended up being a base hit that he scored on. So that he was attempting a 4th stolen base actually already, and we're only 2 weeks in. So I'm buying into that.
Yeah, he's playing every day at second base due to, of all things, Evan Longoria being out at third base. So
right.
Obviously he moves some players around. And Dubon was the one that started in center field the first day that Duggar was out. So they will find a way to get to fill those holes regardless of who you might be expecting. Yeah, the Giants are high on the early season list of teams that are taking more opportunities to steal bases than others. Usually that list is the Rangers and the Mariners and your Royals. The Giants are up there right now, at least to start the season. So we'll see if that holds up. Chris, who you might be looking at to get you a stolen base, the elusive stolen base early on in the season?
I'm going with Nico Hoerner. He's been playing every day. I was a little concerned about his playing time preseason, but playing every day, he's hitting really well. He's up to a 327 average after today. Already got 2 stolen bases. He's pretty quick. I think if he gets the green light, he's going to run. Over the last week, he did steal a base while hitting 458 on the week. So 6 RBI. So he can help you a couple places. And it seems like a strong chance that he could be running and get that steal that you need. He's only rostered 40% of main, 7% of OCs. So you can go a little deeper on him. And even in a shallower league, I'm coming around more on him. And I don't know what kind of power we see him get to, but still I've been impressed with the early returns. And I think oftentimes we forget with a player like Hoerner, like prospect growth is not always linear. He's just 25 years old. Sometimes I think we're eager to put our stamp on a player and say, this is what he is. But I think we're really seeing him come around now, even after I'd say a pretty strong season last year. He didn't hit a home run last year, displayed solid batting average. He's capable of stealing bases. I wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to grow this year. He's already showing a willingness to run in a small sample and a little more power. Love to see that, as well as hitting for solid average. So Hoerner's one that I'm really liking, and I'm thinking if this continues, he could easily stick on especially like a 15-team roster.
Yeah, I'm just happy to see him playing so much. Like with the Cubs, all the moves that they were making in their infield seemed like they were just trying to stack up as many infielders as possible. Obviously, Jonathan VR is the one that stands out the most, but just having Nico out there on a regular basis is a pleasant surprise. All right, so our next category is our opportunity section. These are players that you might like just because of the matchups that they have coming up. Maybe they're added positional flexibility, as we saw with Trevor Story and Bobby Witt getting their added positions this past week, that you can use them somewhere else. Or maybe they're walking into some extra playing time that you didn't quite expect them to have in Nico Hoerner. On that note, before I get your guys' takes, let's go over some schedule notes that you guys should be paying attention to. There are 14 teams that have a 7-game week ahead. That includes Cleveland, Houston, the Angels, Texas, Philadelphia, Milwaukee, St. Louis, Arizona, and Colorado. I will single out Milwaukee because they have a terrible schedule, even though they have 7 games. I understand that there was some devil magic that had to be made to make up the games that were quote canceled at the beginning of the season. But Milwaukee got the short end of the stick on this one. They are in Pennsylvania this week. So they're in Philadelphia this weekend, and they have to travel back to Milwaukee to face the Giants on a 1-game homestand, and then they travel back to Pittsburgh, back to Pennsylvania for this coming after that, and before they come home again to face the Cubs. So they'll be bouncing around a lot. Geographically, it's not that far, but it's just the toll that constant travel puts on teams. There's a reason you play 3-game series. You don't bounce around like football and you play 1 game and then move around a lot. So just keep an eye on that, especially when it comes to catcher usage. You might see some more alternating catchers for Milwaukee. Always point out where Colorado's playing. Colorado is going to be at Philadelphia for 4 and then hosting Cincinnati for 3 to end the week. So you will get a couple games in course to end the week there. Cincinnati specifically is also at home for the first half of their week, so they're going to get a overall good hitter ballpark situation all week long. Oakland is the only team that has 2 off days next week. Everybody else has 6 games pending any rainouts or postponements or anything like that. And as I was scouring the rotations, there are 3 teams that are expected to run out an all-righty starter this coming week. That's Cleveland, and they face off against the Angels in Oakland. Minnesota will face off against Detroit and Tampa Bay. And then the Mets have St. Louis and Philadelphia. So look for a righty-heavy rotation for those matchups throughout the course of the week. And then the Dodgers they should have a very lefty-heavy rotation as they face off against Detroit next weekend. So keep an eye on that, on those matchups when you're looking at platoons and just splits and what have you. On that note, Chris, I'm going to start with you. Based on either any of the notes I just gave up or anything else that you found, who might you be looking at to take advantage of this coming week?
I had Aristides Aquino on there. The Reds do face 3 lefties next week, and I don't know. I'm torn. He's been so bad. He started 9 straight games prior to today, but I just didn't realize how bad he had been. So I'm flipping over to go into David Peralta here, where he's got a lot of favorable matchups as well. Obviously, him being a lefty, they are projected to face 6 righties next week in 7 games. And while Peralta has been a little underwhelming, we're still looking at a pretty dang good hitter who's consistent. And over the last 7 days, he's been coming around a little more. He does have a .333 average over the last week, which is encouraging to see. Only 1 home run so far this year, but I think Peralta is just an underrated source of plate appearances, average, and even a little bit of power too. David Peralta is going to be my pick here, who could benefit from some decent matchups next week.
Yeah, Peralta, 87% rostered in TGFBI, and just checking his status in online championships to get that 12-teamer. He's 45% rostered in those 12-teamers on NFBC. Readily available in the not so much shallow, but shallower leagues for sure, but could still be available in those 15-teamers, at least based on those things. Kevin, who's taking advantage of the situation that they have coming up this coming week?
I got a couple that are shallow league plays for sure. I already mentioned Andrew Vaughn earlier for sure. In the 40% Yahoo leagues, I'd grab him and hope that he gets that additional playing time for the White Sox. Ramon Laureano started his rehab assignment tonight. He is eligible to come back to the Athletics on May 8th. That's 2 weeks from tomorrow. He is 100% rostered in 15-team main events. There are a handful of online championship 12-team leagues where he is available. So take a look, as you already said, and you say every week and already have tonight. It only takes a second to check, but only 26% rostered in Yahoo. So you got 2 weeks. That percentage is going to steadily increase. Grab him now. In deeper leagues, Zach Collins in Toronto, 4 of his last 6 starts have been as the designated hitter. Teoscar Hernandez started swinging a bat on Friday, but this oblique thing it's going to be at least another week by the time he gets some full swings in, does probably a short rehab assignment. 6 right-handed starters, I believe, this week for Toronto. Zach Collins will be the designated hitter for that Blue Jays lineup for much of the week. And he is catching enough that he probably will maintain catcher eligibility for 2023. He is getting some starts at catcher as well. He's rostered in less than half of main event leagues and only 15% of 12-team leagues and on Yahoo. Zach Collins is my main play here.
It does seem like Collins is the one benefiting the most from all the injuries that Toronto's gone between Jansen and Teoscar and even Springer for a day or two. So that's good on him, and hopefully he keeps that catcher eligibility, and we'll see what he does next year. Of course, something to keep in mind, we talk about when we say, hey, this is a shallow league play, but especially in this category, as we're talking about the matchups that people are going to see next week, this is still going to affect, if you roster this player, this is going to decide whether or not you bench them or you're putting them in your active lineup for even half of the week, if not the full week. So just know that, like, when we talk about those shallow options, we're talking to those deep leaguers as well that have to make a decision on who's going to be starting and who's not going to be starting for them this coming week. Talking about this coming week, let's go even further. We're going to talk about future start pitchers as we transition into our pitching categories. Before we get into who we might be picking up for this coming week, we're going to talk about players that you might want to pick up now that might have who are currently slated to have a 2-start week following week. And so I've got a list for you guys here already, and I'm not going to list all of them for our listeners. I want you guys to pick out the ones that you like the most. And so, Chris, I'll start with you. I want you to tell me of this list, and just so everybody's aware, I make a list of players that are slated to have 2 starts, not this coming week, but the week after, that are 50% or less rostered across Yahoo. And so they're going to be readily available in most leagues. And so obviously check your wire to see if they are out there or not. They might not be, who knows, but this is the time to grab them for that extra start on the quote unquote cheap, as I've seen plenty of times these players go for a good 20 to 30% less if you get them the week prior than if you wait until the week of. Chris, of this list, who are you liking based on matchups or just talent or what have you? And then give me a guy that you think is going to be popular that you'd probably be fading.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised that Bailey Ober still is little rostered as he is, and you look at those matchups and they're pretty favorable. It's hard to argue against what he has coming up with Detroit this week. I don't think while Detroit's better, they're not a super scary lineup by any means. And then his 2-start, in 2 weeks is Baltimore and Oakland. I absolutely love that, even though surprisingly Oakland's lineup's been putting up good numbers, but Ober's been really solid.
Winning
this
ball
year.
club.
I know it's insane, but I think this is the easy pickup for me is Ober at 45% here. Bruce Zimmerman also a little under the radar here, where he's been really solid this year, where he does pitch in New York against the Yankees this week, but Minnesota and Kansas City next week are solid matchups, and he's very low rostered there. So Zimmerman is the other one that kind of catches my eye a bit. So those two I'm kind of liking. The traps I feel like are the Mariners guys, Gonzales and Flexen. Their matchups aren't great. They both pitch in Tampa this week, at Houston next week, and then they get Tampa again, but at home next time. Those aren't great matchups by any means. So I think those guys may be the more popular ones, but they're also ones with a little tougher matchup. So I'm avoiding both Marco Gonzales and Chris Flexen.
Yeah, I see that just because, if nothing else, when you want these 2-start pitchers, you're trying to volume your way into these extra counting stats. These are the type of guys that need 2 starts to get any kind of those counting stats that you're looking for, especially with these kind of matchups. So they wouldn't be typically the type of pitcher that I'd be targeting for a 2-starter anyway. And maybe if I can get them on the cheap, this list isn't that robust. So it's a possibility depending on what format I'm in or what league I'm looking at. But for that reason, they'd be my traps as well. Kevin, you see anybody else on here that you like that Kristen mentioned?
Yeah, I go the other way. I am a big Marco Gonzales fan, and I already roster him on several teams, and I'll be throwing him out there this week at Tampa and next week against Houston and Tampa. It's just he typically can give us innings. His first start of the year, he only went 2 innings, but then he gave us 7 against the Astros with 6 strikeouts and only gave up 1 run. That's what I'm looking for. A couple of earned runs against the Rangers, but 6 more strikeouts again in 4 2/3. I think Marco Gonzales is underrated as a Major League Baseball pitcher. So he is definitely my choice from this list, especially since Chris grabbed Ober. I do agree that those are much better matchups.
All right. So yeah, always keep an eye on that. Easy way you can look at that too is if you're looking at FAAB this week on like NFBC, just go by schedule. Don't go by the stats on your free agent list, and look for that little baseball that's showing up on Tuesday or Wednesday of this coming week. More than likely, if the schedule for their team stays even, they may be in line for a 2-start week. The following week, obviously look at their actual schedule. If they only have 5 games, nobody's getting a 2-start week, but that's a kind of a easy cheat way to kind of eyeball guys that might be getting 2 starts the following week. All right, let's talk about pitchers that are starting this coming week. Guys that you might be looking at for wins in case, so your counting stats in the pitching categories. I'm going to start off real quick. A guy that, I'll be looking at, we don't typically throw relievers into this section, but Spencer Strider is somebody I'll be eyeing for this particular reason because of when he's been pitching. And so he is 66% of roster in main events, 22% in online championships, so still readily available in a good chunk of leagues. And obviously he's been putting up ungodly 3-inning outings for Atlanta. And if he stays in that role and they don't throw him into a rotation spot, which seems as though rotation spots in Atlanta keep popping up somehow, he should line up for just 1 appearance this coming week. Might not be somebody I start this week for that reason. Only going to get 3, maybe 3 1/3 innings out of him. He still might get 6 strikeouts. Who knows? But assuming he does pitch Sunday, I don't believe he pitched today, Saturday, as we're recording this. Assuming he pitches on Sunday, it could line him up for another 2-start or 2 appearance outing the following week, making him a 2-start pitcher who's going to put up the amount of innings and the amount of stats that an ace would be putting up if all things continue the way they've been going for him. So he has 2 outings at 3+ innings, puts up that K percentage that he's been putting up. It's like putting out an ace going once for the course of the week. And so Spencer Strider would be somebody that I might be stashing for this week. Might throw him out there if I'm desperate for need a body in my rotation, but more than likely he's more of a stash, and I will throw him out there as long as the schedule lines itself up the way I'm expecting it to for him. Kevin, go back to you. Who might you be looking at for added wins and K opportunities?
Yeah, I really like what we've seen from Jordan Hicks so far. 7 innings pitched, 8 strikeouts, 1 earned run. That would be a great start. Unfortunately, that's 3 appearances so far. But the most recent appearance was a start. He went 3 innings after pitching 2 innings in his first 2 appearances of the season. They are building him up. I doubt he goes 5 innings in his next start or 2. He gets to face the Mets at home this week, and also then Arizona at home as well. It would really be nice if he gets to 5 innings against the Diamondbacks, because the Cardinals would definitely be favored to win that game, and we may be looking at a win here. But the strikeouts are there. He's building up, and if we wait till he's going 5 innings, he's no longer going to be available, and in the places he is, he's going to be very expensive. You need to grab him right now.
Yeah, always looking ahead. And like you said, Kevin, yeah, once he gets that mark, then he'll either already be rostered or he'll be going for a whole lot more. Chris, who might you be looking at for wins and Ks this coming week?
And this might be a little risky to go with this 2-star guy, but Yoan Adon, he was terrible his first 2 times out before having a really solid outing last time against the Diamondbacks. And while the D-backs aren't a great lineup, still went 6 1/3, didn't allow an earned run, struck out 5 and only 2 walks. So that's encouraging for me to see that. And he's been a solid prospect, just 23 years old. So maybe we're seeing a couple bumps in the road in those first couple starts. And he has a 2-start this week. He has Miami and San Francisco. Obviously, the Giants lineup is not the most ideal to be facing, but I don't think Miami's lineup is that dangerous unless you let Jazz or Jesús Sánchez get to you. So I'm a little bit intrigued. I think that Washington could have a chance to at least get 1 win in one of Adon's 2 starts. So that's, at least if you're looking for a win, he gives you 2 opportunities next week to at least get one win and maybe even two. So, it's a risky move. He's not highly rostered and he hasn't been that great, but if you need the wins, it's not a bad option, at least because he does give you 2 starts.
Yeah, what I like about Adon is just typically you get concerned with the younger pitchers or the prospects even losing their rotation spot or getting skipped or getting bumped or what have you. The Nationals don't have a choice but to keep Adon in that rotation. So he's going to get both of these starts this coming week, especially with the likes of Patrick Corbin doing what he's been doing. Like Josiah Gray and Jonah Don they're set in their spots. All right, let's get some ratio help, guys. Chris, go back to you quickly for this one. The guys that are going to help chip away at ERA and WHIP. And these are areas that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about early on in the season. They try to scramble at the end of the season, chip away while you can throughout the course of the year, and you'll be better shape in September. So who might you be looking at that might chip away your ERA and your WHIP?
Yeah, Maikel King with the Yankees. He's been absolutely dominating. He's been flying under the radar. And I think now after his last outing against Cleveland on Friday, where he threw 3 innings and he struck out 8, allowed 1 hit, that kind of, opened people's eyes a little bit, but he's allowed just 1 run this year. He's pitched 10 2/3 with a 0.84 ERA and a 103 WHIP. The strikeouts are there as well, 18 strikeouts. So he gives you that. It's what you were mentioning with Strider in the case where if he's giving you these multi-inning outings, it adds up where he's just been really good. And the K to walk rate is highly impressive on top of the fact that the ratios are really good. So this is a solid option. I don't know how the Yankees plan to continue to use him, but at least for now, it seems like he's going to be using those 2 to 3 inning stints, and he's going to provide a lot for you. And I think that those little things add up with time, as you mentioned. So going out and adding Maikel King, especially if you need someone to plug in your pitching staff this week, I think it's a great option.
Yeah, Maikel King and Strider, at least these guys are going 3 innings at a time, or if you time it, they can still add up, and they're going in these shorter stints, so they're able to put up those higher K per 9s and able to not get hurt by the ratios and what have you. So I think this was a really good call out. Like, you're not getting Maikel King because he's going to walk himself into a save, but he could vulture a win very easily in the right situation. Garrett Cole blows up again and Maikel King comes in and the Yankees come back. He's in the right place at the right time. You don't bank on it. You put it in your back pocket and you're pretty happy about it. Kevin, who are you looking at to chip away at your ratios this week?
Another guy, like you guys are bringing up, guy that's been going multiple innings each time out. He's had 4 appearances. I'm looking at Keegan Thompson for the Cubs. 2 2/3, his shortest outing. His most recent outing was 4 innings. He struck out 14 in 13 2/3. ERA of 0 right now. Now, that doesn't mean anything, but he threw 53 and change innings last season and had a very nice 3-something ERA, right around 3.5, I believe. Problem was he also walked a lot of guys, so he had a 1.48 WHIP. So far this season, in the 13 and 2/3 innings he's thrown so far, which is already a quarter of the innings he threw last season, that walk rate is down as well. His walks per 9 is under 2. So if he keeps those walks down, the WHIP ratio is going to be helpful, just like the ERA. He's given us about a strikeout an inning, and so far every appearance has been close to 3 innings.
Nice. All right, let's get into those save speculations. And I'm going to throw out the obvious choice that will be going in any league that he is available in. That's Jorge Lopez of Baltimore, already rostered across the main event, but 40% rostered in online championships. Doesn't matter. He'll be 100% rostered after this week. Duh. That's my note here. It just says, like, what else are you going to say about this? But my question, though, is even though he is a closer, he's the Baltimore closer. Like, how much is the Baltimore closer, even if you are confident that he is going to be starting or he's going to be the closer even for the next 3 months, if not the entire season? How much is that worth? Kevin, is this a guy that you're not going to get this week because he's going to go too high, or is a closer regardless?
I used to be one of those that really liked closers on bad teams, with the theory being that they weren't going to win in a blowout. The games they did win, and bad teams are going to win 60 games, are going to be within 3 runs, and so there's a save opportunity. the last couple of years, that hasn't played out as well as I had it in my mind that it used to. And being the Royals fan, and even when he was with the White Sox, I really tried to, or I've liked Jorge Lopez in the past and even thought, maybe he'd be better off as a reliever, but such a bad taste in my mouth. I don't know if this sticks. I hope it does. I'm rooting for him, and coupled with, as you asked, with it being a team we don't expect to win a lot of games. Yeah, I think I don't even think I am putting my keep honest bids on this one. I think I'm just letting him go here.
That's fair. But I'm still confident that he will be 100% roster just because of that status that, the capital C status that he has earned at least this past week. And then
the other plus is the Baltimore starters have performed well. The offense hasn't been great, but when they do score runs, their starting rotation has performed well. So that's an added plus for him as well.
Sure. Yeah, they're setting it up for him to succeed. And then the other one we talked about earlier, Dany Jiménez. The reason I want to bring him up, and he might not have any long term, so he might not get bid everywhere as people expect Trevino to come back soon. But just the fact that this is a guy that was picked up. He was only 17% rostered in main events right now and 3% in online championships. And that's because he was picked up in 8 main event leagues last week when the word of Trevino came in late in the weekend, and the bids only range from $1 to $60. So these are the types of moves that you really need to be paying attention to early the week prior. And Jiménez is going to go just because he has collected a save. He's still going to go, even if people think that he's only going to have the role for one more week or even less than that. And he'll probably go for more than 60 because people are going to overreact. So the reason I bring him up here is that these are the types of players that when we bring up a lot of the players here, it's so that you can pay the $1 or you can pay the $10 and not have to pay the $100 and getting the guy that's already in the role. Get the guy that you're stashing for, even if you're just stashing him for a month to see where things pan out. But Kevin, who are you stashing if it's a stash right now in this category?
Yeah, I know some people were on Matt Bush in Texas last week, and I had taken a look. I just wasn't sure if he was going to get the opportunity, but he did on Saturday, and he got his first save. So as you just said, that's going to make him a popular ad this weekend. But for the same reasons you brought up with Baltimore, I think the fact that it's Texas, they're not expected to win a lot of games, but I think they could surprise some people and be a little bit better than people think. And Bush, I don't think is going to cost what Lopez will cost. So this is someone that I think will be popular, but I will have some bids on and hope that I can get him for a little less than some of the other guys will go for.
Yeah, talk about a guy closing for a bad team. This is her fourth win. This was their fourth win, I think, on Saturday. Hopefully that turns around. Obviously, Texas has made moves to better themselves. It just hasn't clicked early on in the season. Chris, who might you be looking at, whether it's a stash, a spec, or somebody who you think has the role now?
I'm going with Andres Munoz for Seattle, and we know that's a pretty stacked bullpen. They've gone all over with saves, but he did get the most recent save on Friday, and whether that sticks or not is to be determined, but he's always been dubbed as like the closer of the future. Just 23 years old. He's pretty dominant. I think he's one where you can afford to put him in your lineup because he's going to give you elite ratios and a ton of strikeouts, even if he's not giving you saves. But I do think he's going to be a sneaky chance to take this role and run with it because he is just that good. And we know he's a flamethrower with the four-seam fastball. He's got a great slider as well. Gets a ton of whiffs on the slider. He has a 59.5% whiff rate on that slider right now. The four-seam average is over 100 miles an hour. I really like Munoz. I've always been a big fan of him, but I think his time is coming where he takes the job and runs with it. And he's still flying under the radar because that bullpen's pretty stacked. So Munoz is one that I think you'd rather get the jump on earlier than later before he costs too much. But that save that he got on Friday could push his price tag up just a little bit.
That's fair. I'm sure we'll bring it up as well throughout the course of the season. Kevin, you mentioned this last. Be careful on how many times you are churning this, as I like to say, like this spot on your bench that you are stashing a reliever that you think might be a closer in the next couple of weeks. We talked about it last week, Kevin, or last year. Are you going to pick up this closer this week? Oh, I'm really interested in him, but I already have Hansel Robles or whoever you were stashing at the time. It's like, I'm not going to just keep churning that spot unless something obvious happens where that player's not going to have a chance in position. I always say it's like the scene from Office Space at the beginning when they're stuck in traffic. As soon as you move over to the other lane, starts moving. As soon as you drop that player, he's going to get that role, or vice versa. Be aware of, again, it's more about being disciplined in your roster construction throughout the course of the season. So let's talk about our final section here. That's our wild card section. This is pretty much anybody we haven't talked to. Maybe any player that didn't fit into a category we talked about earlier that you think you might be specking in the right spot. Most of the time, it's like a prospect that you might think might be coming up soon, or somebody who's on the IL who might be coming off the IL soon, or what have you. And I talked myself out of it early on in the show, but I had Nolan Gorman here as my player. He's only 13% rostered TGFBI. He's not rostered in any main event leagues. He is 1% rostered in OC. Now, of course, in NFBC, these prospects you can't pick up unless they were drafted and dropped. And the reason I bring him up is because he's so fewly rostered. He so limitedly rostered in these leagues, you might just assume that he just wasn't drafted or what have you. But he was actually dropped in 2 main events and 5 online championships in the last 3 weeks. And so they are available in those 5 leagues on NFBC platform. So again, just make sure you're checking for these types of players, whether it's Nolan Gorman, who has 7 home runs in 7 games, or any other prospect that you think might not be available. This is the time to look up those prospects that you might have been interested in, but not interested enough to draft. They might be out there as somebody who took a spec draft pick on them, decided to drop them in week 1 because they didn't make the opening day roster and didn't want to hold on to them, or for any other reason, they might be out there. Chris, since I'm talking about prospects here, I'm going to go right back to you. What prospect are you stashing in this FAAB period if they're available?
It's Grayson Rodriguez. The John Means news obviously is pretty detrimental. I don't know if this has a direct effect on Rodriguez. I think G-Rod was going to come up when ready, and he is ready, which is crazy, but he's just been absolutely dominant so far to start at AAA. Again, he's 22 years old, but man, he is absolutely filthy. Just keeps on dominating. Start again. In my opinion, the best pitching prospect in baseball. So against the Orioles, which has me with a little hesitation, like when do they bring him up? I'm not so sure, but he's definitely making his case. There's not much more he can really do to prove that he's ready at this point. And I just think it's a matter of time before we do see him in the major leagues. And it'd be awesome to see him and Adley come up together. Obviously, Rutschman returning from an injury, or I think he would have been on the opening day roster as well. But how fun would it be to see both these guys come up and just dominate together, make Baltimore fun again with a dominant pitcher and a very solid backstop. The Orioles do need pitching, especially now that we know Means will be out for the year. That doesn't mean that there's direct correlation of Rodriguez coming up, but I do think it's just a month at most, in my opinion, because they just can't keep him down if he keeps pitching like this. I guess they can, but it would be silly to.
We've seen it done before, unfortunately. But as I said before, he's still a pitcher. Get that development up at the major league level so that when your team is ready to go, he's at ace level. He's not still trying to figure out major league, bats. So I think that's a good call out there. And Kevin, let's see. And what kind of speculative ad are you thinking about making this coming week?
Yeah, in leagues where I have a spot for this type of stash, I am adding John Heasley from the Royals organization. He's a AAA Omaha, a little lesser known than some of the other young pitchers that the Royals have. But frankly, at least at the minor league level so far in his career, he's performing just as well as any of the big names did in the minor leagues. And Chris Bubik got shelled again on Saturday. His ERA is up over 14 now. Daniel Lynch looked better in his last outing, actually looked pretty darn good his last outing. But so far, these young pitchers that the Royals are counting on have not come through. And I think Heasley's going to get a chance here sooner rather than later. He's picking up right where he left off last season. Last 2 seasons, actually, he's pitched over 100 innings, over a strikeout per inning both seasons. Nice low whips as well. This season, he's only got 3 starts so far, but a whip well under 1 and a 1.5 ERA. I think the Royals are going to see what they got with him at the major league level relatively soon.
Like Chris said, with Grayson coming up with Adley, I mean, I'd like to see Heasley come up with MJ Melendez at the same time. That would be.
I knew you'd find a way to squeeze him in.
You set it up. All right. On that note, Kevin, I'm going to leave you the final words of the episode. What kind of early season advice do you have for our listeners?
I think one thing I want to bring up is I see a lot, and you touched on this earlier in the episode. We see a lot about not paying attention to standings and rankings of our leagues at this point in the season. And I disagree wholeheartedly, because you can lose too much ground in a category you didn't realize it was happening and put yourself in a hole that you cannot get out of. So it's not we're not looking at them to say, oh, great, I'm leading this league or I'm on track to cash in this league. But you do need to pay attention to where you sit in the category standings.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it quite a bit throughout the season last year. We'll say it again now. If you work just as hard in April as you expect to work in August or September, you won't have to work as hard in September. Right, that's the goal. This is a good call out there. Chris, thanks again, man, for joining us this week. Why don't you take a second to let everybody know what they should be on the lookout for on your end, whether it's on Toolshed or the writing work you do over at Fantrax and what have you.
Yeah, thank you both. Had a great time chatting with you. You can find me on Twitter at Clegg, Clegg. Like I said, my written work at Fantrax HQ. Weekly on Mondays, I do a StatCast article, just looking at some StatCast trends and players that are trending the right and the wrong direction using that. And then I also do a Dynasty and Prospect piece there as well. And over at Fantasy Pros, I'm doing the quick grades, which is basically like a just projection for the next week for hitters, like looking at a variety of different factors. And that comes out every Friday, and also do a prospect report for them. And you can catch us on me and Eric Cross on the Fantrax Toolshed podcast. Talk all things Dynasty, prospects, redraft. Always a good time there. But again, thank you both. Had a great time with you.
Yeah, Chris, thanks so much for being here, man. If you guys out there listening are not listening to Toolshed with Eric and Chris, you're doing it wrong, especially if you are playing Dynasty or just interested in the prospects that are coming up in your redrafts as well. Make sure you are adding that to your rotation. You can listen to that anywhere you're listening to this podcast. So make sure you subscribe as soon as this podcast ends. All right, that's going to wrap it up for episode 56 of On the Wire. Please make sure to subscribe, share, and review the podcast wherever you're listening. We will be back every Sunday with a detailed FAAB breakdown throughout the 2022 season. And, of course, keep a lookout for Kevin's companion article over at pitcherlist.com. It comes out every Sunday afternoon as well. You can follow myself on the Twitter at 80grade. That's all spelled out. And Kevin is at HastingKevin. Of course, follow the pod itself at On the Wire Pod. I'd like to thank our guest, Chris Clegg, for joining us once again. Follow him at Clegg. And I am Adam Howe. And on behalf of Kevin Hasting, thanks for listening, and we bid you goodbye.
We got another day of NBA action, so it's time for your FanDuel crew to make their bets. You know, the new customers who bet $5 get $150 back in bonus bets if you win.
Just can't miss tonight.
Make every night a watch party, only on FanDuel.
21 plus and present in Louisiana. Permitted parishes only. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See full terms at FanDuel.com/sportsbook. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 877-770-STOP.
TaxAct can think of a million things more fun than filing taxes. TaxAct is going to name some now. Sitting in traffic. Folding a fitted bedsheet. Listening to your coworker talk about his fantasy team. Digging a hole. Digging an even larger hole next to that original hole. Unfortunately, TaxAct's filing software can't make taxes fun. But TaxAct can help you get them done. TaxAct. Let's get them over with.
Introducing the second best buffalo thing, Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo. Nothing beats buffalo wings on game day, but with a tangy and cheesy buffalo flavor, Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo is proud to be the second best buffalo thing. Grab Cheetos Crunchy Buffalo today.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar, the classic cheeseburger. Hamburglar?
Robble, robble.
He said, the patties are juicier than ever before. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Robble. Available at most restaurants in this area.